Cool. Um, so, hello, everybody. My main goal of this is when Tana reached out and asked if I could share some project management stuff, some stress management stuff, anything like that, to really get the main goal was to get her in a better place to manage things like project stress. Um, so I have a little sheet here and I'm kind of going to go off the cuff. Like I don't have any like PowerPoint presentation slides or anything like that. The main goal for this is really just a chat of like anyone who's got advice, or I'll pitch how I do it, and then questions, or just a conversation, as you can see by the fireside. But really the two things that I would break this down into, or really the notes that I have, the two main topics are like projects and philosophy. And I'm going to make a lot of references just because like that's how I express myself, as metaphors and references to stories and X, Y, and Z. Most of these things are probably going to be to my experience in like being a manager at previous workplaces, as well as being a teacher at both a high school marching band as well as a drum and bugle corps. Because those philosophies that, as well as being a member in those things, but those philosophies really guided my way into how I think about, projects and work and all this and that. The main reason why I say that is because, I can abstract a lot of what I learned there, because in those situations of drum corps and in marching band, you have a whole season. And it's usually talking, let's say drum corps, because that's the more intense one. It starts in November and it's one weekend a month in November. And then come May, suddenly it's either every weekend or you're there for 30 days full time. And then come the summertime, you're working every single day, traveling around the country and competing. But the entire time you're doing the season, you have one product. It's one show. It's not like a Big Ten marching band or anything like that, where every week it changes and, the workflow. What we did in my drum corps experience is you get one show, and by the end of the season, you have to perfect it and compete to see if you can personally put out the best product, and then in those senses get first place, or in my case 11th place. So that's really a lot of the references that we're doing, because when you think of it as like project management, instead of November to September, we have Monday to Friday. So it's a lot shorter of a season, but you are trying to perfect and really make this product whole. So we'll get into like what I do for projects, but then we'll get into the philosophy behind them. And like I said, if anyone has any questions, like I want this to be an open forum, a place where everyone can be comfortable sharing their experiences, because in my experience, like I was part of, getting back to like the marching band and drum corps thing, 2, 3, 4. I was part of 4 different organizations that all held anywhere from like 150 to 350 people in them, with dozens and dozens of instructors at each organization. And my whole like teaching philosophy and my whole thinking philosophy isn't like I like that guy and I'm gonna follow his thing, because the odds are that I didn't like 100% of what how they did their projects and their teaching and their organization. So what I did is I took 5% from this person and 10% from that activity, and 15% from this group, and I mixed and mashed them all together into my personal philosophy. So what I want to do is I want to share my screen real quick and really show, like, this was the project that Marianne and I just presented, right? And it is like, it's chunky, it's a lot, but it like at first glance you're like, wow, that's very intimidating. It might be a lot of stuff, but really when you're doing your project, you want to start as simple as possible. Um, because when you think of it, like, I made this reference last week, but if you're at the bottom of a mountain and you're looking at the peak and you're saying, you might say to yourself, like, how am I ever going to get to that point? If you see this during project presentations and you're like, oh, we have this, and like, you can click this and see X, Y, and Z, you might think like, wow, how could I ever get to that point? Or how could I design, you know, Spotify.com or like a news website or something? And it's really the small steps that get you there. Um, when I'm running, like doing distance running, or when I was doing running where I would go on like a 3 mile run, I hate running. Like, I absolutely despise running, but the way I get through it is I set myself small goals. Hey, I'm running this, like this 3 mile run, but if I can get to that corner of that street, that's my next goal. And then I set halfway points to that goal. Okay, so that corner of that street is my goal right now. And let's say like that mailbox is the halfway point. And then when I get to that halfway point, cool, I'm halfway to my current goal. And then when I get to that corner of that street when I'm running, I pick a new point. And that really engages my brain of like, it's all really halfway points and checkpoints, and like break it down into achievable goals. And then by the time that you look back on it, you ran 3 miles straight, without taking a break. So here, when you look at this and you look at this code, you really should start simple and break it down as simple as possible, and then start building on it. So the first thing that when Marianne, Brian, and I discussed, when we came to the meme share idea, the first thing we said is, hey, let's have a page and let's have cards on it. We said, all right, we can do that. So we made the page, we broke it up into the HTML, and then we had a goal of let's put cards on it. And when we did put those cards on, then we looked towards the next goal. So really we had a full overview of what we wanted, but we sliced and diced it up into tiny manageable chunks. And one of the ways that we did that is we set small goals every day. Marianne alluded to on Friday that, she said like every day we had a mini stand up and a mini stand down, and we set it like small goals. So that's like one of the more important parts of managing the stress of the whole project of, again, you look at this or you look at any website and you're like, how can we do that? And it's like, all right, well, on day one or day two, Marianne, Brian, and I got together and we said, all right, my goal today is I want to have the ability to click a card and have it pop up. By the end of day two, all that we had when we clicked was that. We didn't have likes, we didn't have any comments, we didn't have editing, anything like that. I said, my goal, simple and sweet. I want to see a title, I want to see an image, I want to see a description when I click a card. And then, like Brian said, all right, day two, I want to put a like button on. And Marianne was really working on the back end of stuff with our database, and I want to set up the controllers today. And then as we went through, by the end of each day, we got together and we really showed off our different functionalities of, hey, if I didn't make it, I was like, hey, this is what I got so far. I have a title and an image, but I can't get the description yet. And I said, that's okay. That's hard work. Brian, you put in a like button and you can click it, but nothing happens yet. Hey, that's hard work right now. And we're achieving those small goals. And of course, every goal is going to be difficult. Like if you run into a bug and if you run into a setback, that's okay. That's just going to change your goal. Instead of, hey, now I'm done with this feature, or I hit this bug in this feature and I want to move on, you want to narrow down to inside of that original, like, let's get this feature done goal, we're going to fix this bug to get the whole feature in. So really small goals every day and setting them for yourself is like the number one way to handle handle day-to-day stress management there. Marianne, I don't know if you want to pitch in with how you felt as well about that, or not.
No, I think it was great. And something you mentioned in the beginning, like you take bits and pieces of, let's say you learned that skill from someone and you took that piece and you took this piece. So I have my different ways of doing project management. It was nice that me and Alec were very similar in organization. And since I've kind of done something similar. I wasn't a project manager, but I managed a sales team. I hated leading the directing part just because of my personal personality. I hate giving directions, I guess you could say. So it was nice for Alec to take over, but there's this, and I actually like studied project management or tried to study a little bit to get the Prince 2 certification. Because I was interviewing before trying to switch over to these jobs. But one of the things I had taken like so many notes, and one of the good things that Alec does is facilitating. Like even just the start of the Zoom call, before we even got into this, you could kind of sense he's really good at facilitating. He'll start off with, here's my goals for today's conversation. Here's the 2 topics. It's very organized. So that's what I like from what I like just witnessed from Alec, and I could tell like that's very project management style and keeps everyone very organized. So I loved being a part of that because it's very much how I've always done things. And I'm always afraid when I'm part of a group that may not know how to organize themselves within a project, that I could be a little overbearing or a little bossy, or like I felt bad because I was like, hey guys, this is what we're doing. Here's the models, here's the whatever. But I think it's also good to be able to facilitate and initiate. So we had a good balance of that with that.
How did you kind of organically come to, it seemed like Alex was more directing the project or facilitating the project between the 3 of you. Did that just kind of organically come about?
Yeah, so with that, I think we really figured out our personal strengths and weaknesses where, like full disclosure, I did not touch the back end. The only time I touched the back end was when Dane, Angelo, or Adam popped in and we were like, dudes, we have no clue what's going on that's wrong and why we're getting these errors. And they're like, oh, go into the controllers and change this. And then it worked. Like setting up the back end, doing anything in the back end, like I didn't touch it, like I knew that my strengths were mostly at this point JavaScript focus. So I focused mostly on the JavaScript side. And Brian and Marianne were very good with the back end, setting up the back end and getting that all working and the models connecting to each other. So right off the bat, we really focused on our personal strengths and weaknesses. And then once we got the project running, and things showing up, like Marianne, for example, said like, I want more practice with JavaScript. So I'm going to challenge myself to set these buttons up, and I'm going to challenge myself to make this dark mode a thing. So really the splitting up of it was, let's focus on our strengths right off the bat. And then once we get a decent product setup, then we can start focusing on challenging ourselves and really pushing our limit. And that's what we talked about. Actually, the README changed, but when we had our original README, Marianne actually typed out like, this is what each person is going to do. And it was kind of arbitrary of it, but like we said like, hey, Alec's going to set up a front end, Marianne or Brian are going to, like Marianne's going to do the controllers and the models, Brian's going to do the seeds, and it was all about just separation. Like we divided to conquer this project. And that first original division was based off of strengths and weaknesses.
How did you, how long did it take you to initially kind of wireframe the project and then decide, because it was very much, you had to be coordinated between the back end and the front end.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in order to do the back end, you had to know kind of up front, okay, what is our database going to look like? What are our
Yeah.
tables going to look like?
So, Marianne, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our first day was us deciding what our backend, like the specific models were going to be, or the schema was going to look like.
Mhm.
Yeah, like a meme's going to have a title and it's going to have an image and
Yep.
likes and this and that. So
So we wrote up something on the AWW, the whiteboard thing.
yes,
Yeah, that's a great program. I like that.
Kind of had like a little draft of what the models were. We knew we'd have memes. We knew memes would have comments and then users. So we kind of started off from there and just brainstormed off of that whiteboarding.
Mhm.
Right.
We knew we needed models, we knew we needed controllers, and then each one had attributes. So we kind of organized it from there. And then I think that's where it kind of took off.
The one splitting point too is once I knew what the memes were going to look like, I actually created the same type of dummy database that we've had in our labs and our code challenges. So what I did is I made a small little database that just had a memes object that had an array of memes. And if you look, the memes are always going to have an ID. They have a title, they have likes, description, and URL. And that was the simplest thing that we came up with of, hey, a meme's got a title, it's got a number of likes on it, it's got a description and a URL. So I was able to start the JavaScript side before the database was actually set up because we set up this skeleton of this is what the major thing in our project is going to look like as far as the database. And when it came time, like we didn't have the time to do it, but like we also had a users model, you know, where, you know, like a user had a name and an ID, and the goal was to have, like, instead of anonymous, it was going to say a specific name, or, you know, the meme was going to say like, so like Scott posted this at blah blah blah. But we just didn't get there because we focused on the small first, on
Right.
what the main thing we wanted to look at. And then later on, when the database in the backend was actually set up, I never used this db.json file again because we had it set up as the database now. One thing, speaking of that though, is that like that I want to segue into is this styling and these cards specifically came from Bulma. And the note that I have on my sheet is, if a major feature isn't working, scale it back. And then underneath that, I wrote simplicity leads to greatness. Because like some of the best websites that you'll find online, and I think Adam said this as well during the project presentations, those websites are simple. You know, like if you go to a website that is just like flashy and gaudy and has pop-ups and ads all over the place, like the first thing that you're thinking is like, get me out of here, you know. But a simple website that says like, hey, here's this and here's that and this does this and click here to go there, and like that's attractive. But the same thing happens for developers and code. So this Bulma template actually, if you go to the website, the Bulma templates website, you can see everything that they offer, and you can run demos of what they offer in this. So this modal cards thing, I'll go to the preview as well as the source code. This is basically what we decided, right? So I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like you can click anywhere on the card and expands it, or you can click the image and it expands that, or like, oh, click the image to bump it, or do click anywhere on the card. And we decided like, that's really cool. And I was like, yeah, like I could figure that out. And then I got the source code, and this is literally the source code for that webpage. And I was trying to break that down and like create 15 divs just to put a figure and an image in and this and that. And it took me about a day to realize, I was like, that is too much for me. You know, like I recognize like I can't do that right now. I can't break this down. I don't understand it. It's not worth right now my time to set all this up for it to maybe work. So
Right.
instead, what I did is I like YouTubed like Bulma modal tutorial, and it popped up and it was like 7 lines of code, and I watched it and put it in and got these cards, and I was like, that's awesome, you know. And like,
Hmm.
and then from there, like I was able to expand it out and really show what we had to offer. Like the Bulma, if I scroll up, like this really right there, like that is the basis to set this up. And then I just created the cards following that tutorial that I posted, but it really was like 7 lines of code. And that to me is so much better than those 300 lines of codes with those modals, because that was like, yeah, I could do it, but it's absolutely intimidating and absolutely not working for me right now. So really, to that point, I saw that major feature, I saw what could be done, and I recognized I can't do that. You know, I recognize like this is a little overwhelming for me, so I'm going to take a step back and try and re-simplify what I've got going on right now. And in that term, like I want to say simplicity leads to greatness, and not saying that this website is greatness, but it's better than what could have happened if I just looked at that source code, tried to imitate it, and have it not work. And if I kept just like hitting my head against the wall like that.
Well, it's a good, simple, kind of solid, consistent interface.
Yeah, and if you think of like Andres and was it Jordan? Were they partners with the Maze project? That was a very appealing website, and it was a very appealing thing because all it had was users score, you know, it pop up the maze, and you know, take care of it. There wasn't really and I mean this in the best of ways, there wasn't really anything flashy about it. There wasn't like something that stood out in a way that was revolutionary, but that's what made that website great, because it was simple and effective. And that's really, really what led me to liking that website a lot, is for those exact reasons. So let's pivot real quick from the focus of projects to now the focus of like mental philosophy when approaching those projects. And then as we go through, like, of course, I'll make sure to stop because I'm talking y'all's ears off right now. I'll make sure to stop and make sure that if there are any like questions or comments, concerns, anything like that, I want to get the feedback from you, because if you guys are like, yeah, he's saying that, but like I 100% don't agree with it, like I want to make sure that like I'm able to assist as much as possible, at least in sharing my like approach to these things. I think philosophy, as like useless as some philosophy courses and like majors are when it comes from like the ability to get a job after college with that major or minor, like the ideas and classes themselves are very important, because philosophy is really how you think about anything. And one of the biggest things that I learned, getting back to the drum corps thing, when I marched with the Crossmen in 2017, I was in Texas, in San Antonio, for a month straight. I lived in a football stadium, slept in the press box, and it was like there wasn't a single day that wasn't above like 89 degrees, you know, and it was just like Texas heat every day. We were out on that field for like 16 hours a day, you know, got 45 minutes for lunch, but it really was like 15 minutes because we had to travel and put on sunscreen and drink water and blah, blah, blah. And they had this thing called the beatings, which was basically just like high intensity training. They circled us up in the middle of the field and they said, hey, we're going to play and march through this exercise, and then we're going to bump up the tempo, and then we're going to bump up the tempo, and then we're going to bump up the tempo to the point. And they like, it was like boom, 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 like do it, do it, do it, do it. And by the end, we're all like huffing and puffing and wheezing and this and that. And like, it was the beatings. And I remember exactly where I was on the field, exactly thinking, like what was going on. And I was like, is right now going to affect me in 6 months? Is the stress and the pain and, the fatigue mentally and physically going to affect me in 6 months? And really, the season is like 3 months long. So the answer was no, because in like 6 months, I'm just going to be chilling on my couch, drinking a beer or something like that, instead of in this Texas heat. And that completely changed how I thought about it, because, and I apply that to my coding, because like last week was a stressful week. Going through this project was really stressful, but I thought like, hey, in 6 months from now, is this pain and this stress that I'm experiencing right now going to still be affecting me in this way? And honestly, the answer was no. And even if you scale it back, hey, in 2 weeks, is the pain and the stress and the fatigue that I'm feeling right now going to still be affecting me on my day to day? 2 weeks from now, when we're in the middle of like week 2, like code challenges coming up on Wednesday, are you going to still be stressed about this, like last week's project week? And more than likely, the answer is going to be no, because we're going to be stressed about other stuff. But keeping that in mind, it can really reshape how you think about like handling that stress and the importance of that stress, and like the magnitude of that stress, really. Because if you think of that, like, I handle that in every single situation of my life. At the end of the day, I looked forward and I realized like the pain now is not going to be the pain forever. And that's how I approach project weeks as well. I don't like, that's just me, really. That like, I think ahead, and even in arguments, I'm like, hey, am I going to let this get to me? Because it's not going to be like, I'm not even going to think about this in a few weeks. Like, one thing that I wrote down is that we need to accept our stress and own it, but not let it control you. Like, you need to be able to look at yourself in the middle of these projects, in the middle of these labs, and lecture next week and be like, yeah, I'm stressed, but I'm not going to let that change how I'm acting. Like, if you learn to recognize your stress and you learn to accept your stress for what it is, that it's a part of you, that's going to change your whole perception on the whole thing. Because a lot of my life leading up until like I really developed these things were, I saw stress as something that was always weighing me down. It was, a 1,000-pound man sitting on my shoulders, and like I could barely move and barely do anything. But then I realized like, no, that stress is part of me. And that gave me the freedom to manage it accordingly. Does that make sense at all?
Actually, can I give feedback on that?
Yeah.
So when we were doing Feelings Friday, you were saying, gosh, this week was so stressful. And you said that, but that was the first time I would have thought that he was stressed based on how he handled himself throughout the week. And so like one of these things that I wrote down in these notes about when I was studying Prince 2, it was saying only 70% of our communication is verbal, the content of our communication, but 38% is conveyed through the quality of the voice tone, the volume, the speed, the pitch. So like throughout the week, I would never have been able to sense any sort of stress, because the way you carry yourself is, whether you were stressed or not, your voice tone never changed. I mean, we cursed a few times here and there, but it was all in good fun. You know what I mean? But it never did change. So I would have never known that you were stressed at all, or like you're like, this is just like an anxious week. I only found out when you said that in Feelings Friday. I was like, wow, he was stressed. So I think that's a good quality for people to like take on, or to manage with themselves, especially someone that's leading. Like I would have never known, but he handled himself.
It can be a lot, but having consistency in your like a lot of stuff emotionally, I am always a big proponent of like, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be stressed, because that's human nature. you know, if I have a breakdown, I have a breakdown. That's just how it be sometimes, you know. If I'm stressed, I'm super stressed. But the other biggest thing that I learned from drum corps is like when you're getting the crap kicked out of you and you're in like hour 7 of being out in this field, like in the middle of Missouri, and it's terrible all the time. Um, you know, the instructors there would always say it's a choice. You know, it's a choice. You're choosing not to do this. You're choosing not to work hard. You're blah blah blah, this and that. And like that, like at the time, I was like, dude, I hate you so much. You know, like how dare you tell me that I'm choosing not to work as hard as I can? But really, what they were trying to convey is like, a lot of the times we don't realize it, but we are choosing certain things to let us get bogged down. And when I really think, and that goes back to like, hey, is this going to affect me in a few months or a few weeks or even a few hours? You know, we might be in the middle of a stressful day, and like a few hours from now, you're going to be eating chicken and drinking some like tea or something like that and being relaxed. So, but like it really, a lot of the times when you're getting something hit at you, or like you're getting weighed down, like it is more of a choice than you think it is. And I would implore you guys and gals, the next time that you get yourself into a stressful situation, kind of like remove yourself and disconnect yourself a little bit. Take a step back, like imagine that you're having an out of body experience and think like, is this part a choice? You know, yeah, that was my fiance playing a video in the background, by the way. But uh, almost have an out of body experience, and you know, look down at yourself and say like, am I choosing to let this negatively affect me, or can I spin this in a positive light? Um, and that's something that like completely revolutionized how I handle myself every day. You know, I can be having the worst day of my life, uh, and I could, through that, I can choose how I speak to Marianne. You know, I could say like, oh, Marianne, like, oh man, we have to do our project now, and oh, this is terrible, blah blah blah. Or I could say like, hey, let's do our project. You know, and it really is like the craziest thing, like mentally. I could be going through the most anxious week. I could be thinking about doing other things. I could get distracted, but I am choosing not to let that affect how I speak to people. You know, because I will always come forward in a sense, with a sense of like professionalism when it comes to speaking, no matter how I'm feeling. Leading back to band and drum corps, they always say no matter how your day is going, as soon as you step on that football field, it's job time. You know, it's go time. It's time to work on bettering yourself and bettering the product. And that's how I really say, no matter if I get into a fight with a family member or a friend, or you know, a significant other, or you know, anything like that, if I get a TV show spoiled for me that I was super excited about, as soon as I sit down in this chair and I turn this computer on, you know, it's project time, and all of that is behind me now. I'm going to drop it, and I'm going to like focus on what I got to do. And as soon as I turn this computer off, I'm mad again. You know, I'm stressed, I'm anxious and all that. And that's really something that to me is a choice at that point. Like it's to quote Book of Mormon, it's like a light switch. You know, you can flip it on and flip it off, and really there, I'm pausing all my anxiety. I'm pausing my stress and my outside influences to focus on what I got to do there. And that's a really really hard thing. That's super hard. That like none of this that I'm talking about is easy. It takes time. It takes patience. You know, it takes practice. Um, but really, it's the little things every single day of like, hey, can I uh, can I speak to Dane in the way that I'm really feeling, or should I do it in a way that's like more like professional when we're talking about this program or this code here? That's an awesome point, I would say. Real quick, I want everybody to do a quick 7th inning stretch because we're rounding the corner here. So go ahead and do a quick stretch and let's get into it because we've been talking about this stuff for a long time.
I did Joy's yoga, a couple of yoga things the other day. Like, oh, this does feel good.
I've been absolutely sitting like a caveman for the last week. Like even now I'm like, you know, so either way, quick stretch. I want to do another pivot real quick. I've got like 3.5 more points and a quick little screen share. And then Wintana, if you're okay with this, I want to change directions because you were really the focus of what like what brought us all together. So I do, oh, Dane, we'll see you later. But I do want to pivot towards you and really get your personal side of things and like with your project and how you were feeling and maybe we can diagnose some stuff of like, you know, what we could do or what you could do leading into the future and stuff, because this talk really is brought to us by you. So, and again, if you're not cool with that, if you feel like, oh, the pressure's on and like I don't want to open up that can of worms or anything, that's completely acceptable too. Because like at this point, I'd like, just like Dane said, I'm not going to force anyone to say anything, you know, and if you're like, I really don't want to get into like what I did or what happened during my project week, like that's completely cool. But the few points that I had left, to piggyback off of what Dane was saying before about like he was in the circus and then anxiety was always there. When I was in college, like I loved marching band. The only reason I went to the college I went to was because of the marching band. And when I put on that uniform, like I felt different. And the same thing happened when in turn I got up to teach in front of high school kids and to teach other people in the drum corps field. And really like when Marianne was talking about like my voice was different and the way that I like she didn't know I was stressed. I was told by multiple people, my fiance included, that like, hey, when you get up to teach, you know, like you change, you know, and this term has a bad connotation to it, but it's kind of like code switching. If anyone knows what that is, code switching is the act of changing how you speak and how you act to fit in with certain groups. So like in high school, I would talk to the nerdy kids and speak to them in a certain way, but then I would talk to like the skater kids and talk in a different way and like use different slang and this and that. But that's kind of how it is. Like we are actors when it comes down to it, of like, I have a teaching voice. Right now, I'm using my teaching voice, you know, like this lower tone, very clear speaking thing. Whereas if I go downstairs and I hang out with my fiance and my roommate, I'm like, yo, what's up, dudes? Like it completely changes. And that's really like that whole different tone of voice is very important when it comes to the professional world. And I'm speaking like I have experience in the coding professional world, which I really don't. It's just when it comes to like when I taught, you know, I had this tone and this body posture and this movement of like, I'm teacher Alec now. You know, I'm not chill after rehearsal or like go get some food Alec. Like I am teacher Alec. And that's kind of how we should approach coding too, of like, I'm coding Wintana right now, you know, and like this is how I'm going to act and how I'm going to present myself because this is what I want to do every time I code. That's like the half point. Two things that I want to say are cater to your interest with these things, you know. Like Adam was as a musician, and then he went to Broadway.com because that's a music-based thing. Like Marianne and Brian and I all love memes, so we catered towards that. If you're not doing something that you're super interested in, you're not going to really have that drive to excel. I was a banker before this. I worked at a PNC bank on the island, and like banking was not my thing. Like I did it because it was a job and I needed money, but like with my coworkers, I started talking about computer stuff. I started talking about coding. I started talking about movies or Star Wars. And literally one of my old coworkers was like, wow, you really like that like computer stuff, like I could change or I could see your whole demeanor changed when you started talking about that. And like, you got so in depth and stuff. And it's like, yeah, I'm not going to do that about selling people credit cards or like selling people loans and stuff like that. You know, like I'm passionate about computers. So I'm going to talk about that a whole lot more and be more interested and be more energetic about it because it's something I love, you know? So that's how we have to focus. Like when we get a job, you know, we're not all going to be drones behind a keyboard tapping away to make some website or do X, Y, and Z. Like we can cater towards that. Hey, you like, fashion and stuff, work for Stitch Fix, you know, and get those people. Or you like music, like go work at Spotify or some other type of website like that, you know. And that's how I approach the project too, of like, I have not done a project that I have not been interested in. And if I have done a project that I've not been interested in, I probably wouldn't have gotten very far in like the interest and like the quality of that project. um and beyond that, the last thing that I have before this quick screen share, is like, if you're not super confident about a certain topic, don't try and excel that. You know, if going back to like this, keeping it simple, simplicity leads to greatness, you know, like if the only thing you can do is show one card on a screen and you're super confident about that, don't set a goal that's like 15 cards on the screen. And when I click them, they flip around and show sparkles out the side, you know, like if you're super confident and I can show a card, you know, show the card and make sure that you really get that. Because don't stress out about like adding a million features if you don't have the confidence level in yourself to do each of those things. That's the last thing that I had as my notes. The one thing I sent Wintana a video that I posted a few weeks ago. And it's called The Super Mario Effect. It's a TED Talk. And it's about this guy who designed a game, and sent it out for people, his Twitter followers, to play. And the people that, like, there were two versions. One had a point-based system and one didn't. And it turns out the people that didn't have the point-based system did better because every time you failed, you lost points. And people decided, no, I don't want to do this anymore because I'm losing points. And here in this portion of the video, he says, hey, you have a game. Here are the instructions. You know, you have 6 buttons. Here are the instructions. Push button 3, 5 for 5 seconds, and then blah, 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 blah. He said, you know, we need to restructure how we're thinking about things. We need to restructure how our minds work when it comes to certain things. He said, hey, take this. Now, what if we rotate these instructions? And instead of the buttons, let's put the buttons in a certain order. And now, instead of just black and white or like a gray metal, let's change those buttons to look like this. And then instead of those instructions, let's change the instructions to look like that, you know. And effectively, we're doing the same exact thing. We're pushing one button for 6 seconds, and then we're pushing another button for 1 second. And that's how we're doing it with coding. You know, we have all these instructions right here for our code and for our project. And these are the different functions that we use, and the DOM content loaded, prevent default, everything right here. And the instructions are how to put them together. But instead of thinking like, oh, it's 6 buttons and a set of instructions, you know, it's 6 functions and we have to make this code, we need to start thinking about it a little differently, where it's like, hey, this is a puzzle, you know, this is a game. And I'm not going to be like, when I play games, I'm not stressed. Or when I'm doing a puzzle, I'm not stressed. It's challenging, absolutely. But am I stressed out about it? No, I'm having fun putting this together. And, you know, for me, when I think about projects, it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of just random things everywhere. But as I start piecing it together, that whole picture comes together. That whole meme website comes together because I got the images to show and the text to show and the description to show. And then I put it inside of a card. And then I put that card on the page, you know, and I figured it out slowly, where instead of stressing out of like, oh my God, these functions are so tough, I thought of it as a game, or I thought of it as a puzzle. That really like changed, no pun intended, the game for me. Because it reframed, it took the stress out of the situation. It reframed my thought process on creating a project, because no longer am I creating 400 lines of code, and some of it's broken and other parts of it, I don't know how it worked. I'm creating a puzzle that, hey, some edges might not exactly look great. Socrates wants to say hello, by the way. But yeah, that's really like the long short of what I have. If anyone else has any comments, or not, Wintana, if you're okay with it, I want to see like let's get you speaking a little more about like how you felt, or your process, or where you thought like good things happened and bad things, because as much as we focus on the bad, we need to start accepting and recognizing the good parts of it. So first I want to open up and see if anyone else has any comments about anything we said, what I just shared, anything like that. Okay, cool. If not, that's completely okay too. But Wintana, if you're not comfortable with this, just let me know and we can do whatever else. But since you were the one that asked, I want to make sure that we do focus on you at least for a little, or as much as you're comfortable with, because I mean, you're the one that asked to have this chat in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we struggle with is very mutual. The pressures, the anxiety, the empath being overwhelmed with different feelings. I can relate to all of that. My issues, one, I suck at planning out projects. That's part of it. The thing you were talking about, like doing it in little increments and setting small goals. I don't do that. I just look at the end result and I'm like, all right, what's the fastest route to get up there? And just try to execute as much as you can, as quickly as you can. And I think that gets overwhelming. Another thing is like the stress and anxiety part of it. It gets really overwhelming, that switch that you were talking about, and looking at yourself from like a third person, looking into the situation and saying, hey, am I really going to be bothered by this in about a week? No, I don't have that type of control quite yet. And then there was like the time crunch too. Like up until Friday morning, we were trying to get functions to work. Soon as right after feelings until like through yesterday, pretty much got them all knocked out. The pressure of the deadline was no longer really there. It was more just for us to execute this, the project is something I really loved and I thought it was great. Yeah, we got it done. So I don't know. It's the anxiety thing. The switch is what I really need to work on.
And I will say, like, this is not like, I didn't wake up yesterday and be like, yeah, this is how I be now, like this is me now. Like I'm okay with like doing all these things like this. For me, for me to really realize these things, it is like a decade-long process. And again, this is just like how, like Dane was saying, emotional maturity. This is how I develop myself to the point where I am. Because in my personal life, like I've had a decent amount of highs. I've had a lot of lows and a lot of like rock bottom lows. And really seeing the full range of that spectrum allowed me to say like, hey, is this the worst thing in my life? And like, am I going to make it through this? And every single time is yes. So like, this is a hard thing. That like that switch that we were talking about is super, super hard. Like, what are you talking about? Like, just don't be anxious, like that, like that's not something like that wasn't at you. That was you guys reacting to me saying like how can you just say not to be anxious or like switch it off or something like that. Like that's something that's a really challenging thing. And do I struggle with it still? Absolutely. But what really changed me is thinking about it every now and then. It's not something that was embedded into me right when I learned it. And it's not going to be something that's embedded into you right when you learn it. But hopefully, maybe come next project week, on like day 2, you'll think about it once. And then on day 3, you'll think about it like 3 times, and then day 4, you'll think about it like another 3 times of like, hey, am I going to let this affect me right now? Or, hey, like, let's take chunks. And what you were saying just now about like, yeah, you think of the end goal, like, let's get there as fast as possible, like, right up to it. Why can't you take that end goal and make it a little smaller and just make a bunch of them in a row? So you see that end goal of like, let's get to that as fast as possible. Let's get a whole website as fast as possible and get those features running. Hey, why don't you take that and say, or this is my suggestion, not a demand. Say, hey, I have one feature. Let's get that running as fast as possible. And then you get it. And then you say, hey, okay, I have that feature. That's the new baseline. And now, oh, there's another feature. Let's get that as fast as possible. And then you get there and you say, all right, this is my new baseline now, these 2 features. And then pretty soon, like it almost looks like a stock market bumping up or whatnot. But you'll reach that top, you'll reach that full website. But instead of going like this, it's more just little successes to get up there. Steps, not like a mountain, the time crunch thing sucks. Like that's really it. I felt the time crunch, I'm sure everybody felt the time crunch as well. And the crazy thing is like you said, as soon as that time crunch was gone, you were like, yeah, let's chill, let's do this, this is great. I got nothing for that. So
Could I tack on to that?
Mhm.
So I think the combination of what you're saying in terms of planning, like you're not one that plans as much prior to a project. The combination of that and anxiety do tie in together. And I maybe didn't feel it as much because I this being the third one, I kind of anticipated that this will be stressful. And I think, I don't know if you were in the cohort yet, but I remember talking about how I love stress. I feel like you won't enjoy certain moments or be able to handle anxiety as well until you experience all these difficulties. So then, because if you always have it easy, you won't know how to handle when a difficult situation comes along. So as an example with this project, I already knew that the first 2 projects, we spent all of Monday planning and just writing out models and coming up with that idea. So we kind of took the weekend to brainstorm. We wrote down our models on Sunday. We all sent it to each other and Alec looked at it. I think Brian might have looked at it on Monday, but we already knew coming in Monday morning that we were ready to submit. And I think that took away like a good 4 hours of time that people were just now starting to think about it. So I think Adam was saying, oh, it's going to be stressful next week and it'll be stressful in this phase. Well, if you already know that it is, having that anticipation and preparation for it, you'll still be stressed, but it's stress isn't always a bad word. Like I love stress, maybe because I'm such a planner. So like, I don't know if that makes sense. But like putting those 2 together, if you plan or anticipate all of that, it takes a lot of burden away from you.
I can agree to that. I think it can even take away from it, right? So if you have a plan and you have set goals that you want to achieve, if you reach that goal, you still have a lot to go. But because you reach that goal, it takes away from the stress of like, oh no, I haven't done X, Y, and Z yet.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Well, I figured with coding, there's already this stress of like debugging where you're just like nothing works and you're just like, oh. I'm like, let's take away the other stress of planning because we're already about to get a debugging stress. So minimize all the types of stress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever fear that to say you're not okay is also you becoming like that pessimistic person you don't want to deal with?
No. Just because you know, that is a human condition. I think that we are so trained to think that like being sad or being pessimistic or anything like that is just such a negative trait, and that there's nothing that you can do about it and blah blah blah. Like literally, if you find someone on this earth who is never sad, I'm gonna tell you that they are a trained actor, you know. Like every single person, no matter what, is like always going to have anxiety or always going to be sad at some point or another, or pessimistic at certain situations. That is just the human condition. And tying it back to the beginning, like once you accept that, you unlock potential, or like a potential to do so much. Whereas like when I said that like I'm anxious or I'm stressed or something like that, I recognize that that is part of me. You know, it could be a big part, it could be a little part, but it's still Alec. And when I accept that, I don't let it control me anymore. And you know, when I am stressed, I don't let my stress bog me down and freak me out and this and that, because I know, hey, I'm stressed and that's cool. You know, that's fine. Um, and like when I get pessimistic, because I do all the time, you know, that's another part of me. And like it's okay to be those things. But I'm choosing not to let that define me. Um, but I'm accepting it. You know, I'm not seeing it as like a shunned away bad thing. Oh, like my stress, no, like get away from me, the sun, blah blah blah. Like I'm welcoming of it, and when I start to hold the metaphorical hand of that stress, that's when we can walk together towards the right path, you know, and towards the right end goal together. Um, that's how I see it. Again, I'm like crazy. So but to answer, like I don't see that as like a negative thing or me becoming a pessimistic person, because you know it's the stress is part of me. It's who I am. And I can if I can obtain goals when I'm stressed, you know, I can do anything. But again, that's just me. um
Can you come here?
One last thing that while Marianne was speaking, I thought of that, and I promise it'll be the last point before we all split. But the first two phases, like I was like 9 to 5 we're working, and then I'm eating dinner for an hour, and then I'm going upstairs and working until I fall asleep. And that like destroyed me in a really bad way. And then this phase, for the most of it, except for the first week, like week 2 and project week, most nights, not every night, but most nights, it was 9 to 6, we got done. I maybe stayed until 6:30, and then I was done for the night. And that was something that really kept my stress level down and my anxiety down, of like, again, that switch, you know, I flipped it on, it's coding time, 6 o'clock came around when I shut my computer down, like or when we broke, like we were done, you know. And that's really important too. Like I guess when you were doing your project, did you work after hours a whole lot as well? Or were you more of like,
Wake up at like 2 a.m. because I was dreaming about code for a little bit and go back to sleep.
mm-hmm. And that's a really difficult thing to do as well, is like set yourself up time to be like, this is when I start, this is when I end, and like I can squeeze it a little bit and mold it a little bit, but like set yourself some very firm stopping points, so that you don't get overwhelmed and you don't get freaked out. And like Dane said at last feelings, like your brain learns at night while you're sleeping. You know, you learn, you intake so much stuff, and then you process it while you're asleep. But like you also need that time to just chill, you know, because like I don't think anyone here can turn off the computer and immediately lay down in bed and fall asleep. You know, you're always tossing and turning, and your mind's just going. But you need to structure that time in. Like, yeah, I'm going to give myself an hour for dinner, and then I'm going to watch some TV or read a book or do X, Y, and Z, and like prevent yourself from making frequent after-hour coding or learning or anything like that. That's my last point. If anyone else has anything to say, feel free. The floor is open. Again, if it's like, hey, this was really cool that you said that, or anything else, just for the sake of the group or for the sake of the video, feel free to say it.
I just had a couple of things that I thought about, kind of mental notes as we went along. The one thing was being able to compartmentalize. You've got to allow yourself, those down moments and those stressed out moments, and then you give yourself some time, and then I always had my business was in doing assembly, manufacture kind of stuff, and I'd have some really lousy days, when I didn't want to go in, turn the machines on, and but I always had that Breaking Bad phrase in my mind, okay, let's cook. So I'd flip the machines on and say, okay, let's cook, and get it done. But
yeah, of course. I love talking about not only like project planning. Mental health is a huge thing, like a huge proponent in my life, and just getting to chat and get to know everyone as well. Like that's also another important part of a team and a group. We need to have that community. Just like Flatiron says, like the community is one of the best parts, because my college experience. I was actually speaking about this earlier today. Like my college experience was like, hey, good luck, you're on your own. Like I'm gonna read the textbook to you, and then you're completely on your own with very little resources, or at least very little resources that are given to you up front, and I didn't have this methodology or anything like that. And like I really struggled through college, and it was not my thing. And like that's where most of my lows happened, because like I didn't at least outwardly see the resources that I had, and I didn't have the community. Like I didn't have any computer science friends. I had like two, and they were both in my senior year. And like up until that point, like I didn't have people to go to ask for help or anything like that, and the professors seemed so standoffish and blah blah blah. But here, like the community is very strong, so we know that we can help each other with these talks. Or I mean, if this becomes a series or something like that, right now it's just a single one. But like I think it's good to have these little like standalone speaker presentation. If anyone in the future does want to talk about something else, like that would be really solid, I think. But yeah, does anyone have anything else left to say before we wrap up and get back to our snow-covered lives, at least in the DC area?
Time to go out, clean the cars off.
Quintana, I want to challenge you to just shut down your laptop one of these days, and like at 6 p.m. Yes, it's hard to say because you're like, how the heck do you do all the labs then? If we have lecture all day, when do you do labs? But just shut down your computer, and the next day tell me if you have a dream that night. The only reason I say that was I had dreams repeatedly, nightly, to the point I actually did have a draft of a blog about it, because I was like, I'm gonna get deeper into the psychology and all of this stuff about the brain and dreaming about code. But it actually stopped. It stopped in phase 3, more so because I do force myself to take a break. But thank goodness basketball, like I'm a big NBA fan. So the moment this like a game is on, I don't care if something is due, like I need that break, and I'm glad I have that kind of passion about it. And I haven't had dreams about coding since December. What month is it? Yeah, December. Yeah, so just try it if you happen to have dreams repeatedly. I noticed that my dreams stopped, and the only difference I've done is that I take the nights off. So
Before you close it off, just one thing, maybe two. I never thought sending you that message would lead to this, First off, I didn't even think you'd respond, but thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is like, you really elaborated and thought it out and screen shared, and I really appreciate it. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, we should totally keep this going. I really thought about these little fireside chats to be a thing on a regular basis. All of some, like, I haven't gotten a chance to know a lot of y'all, but like Marianne, you talk about branding and how to build your LinkedIn and networking. Scott, you said you have a business background. I feel like everyone has something cool to share. If they're down to share, we should totally make this a thing.
Yeah, I totally agree that if we can, like, I don't know a whole lot, so this is really the extent of like, I could teach you marching band on like 24/7, but like, I would totally agree that if we could like keep this up, or someone says, hey, I've would like to talk about this, or we can have a chat about like exactly like branding, or LinkedIn, or marketing, business, or business management stuff like that. I completely agree with that.
I actually sent a video in the Slack that you started, saying that you were doing this today. And I saw, like, I Googled some random, I wanted to find like a funny meme about fireside chats and came across this YouTube. And this guy has like digital fireplace thing behind him, but just the whole aspect of it, he was saying firesides with whatever, and just the music. I thought it was funny, and I thought Blair had said something about you should have a fireplace behind you. I'm like, this should actually be a thing. When we enter fireside chat, we're actually doing fireplace, like, yeah, I
Yeah,
think
I would definitely agree that we could open up to like different topics, and it is nice because although like I definitely talked your ears off, it was good because it was a discussion. It was, let's all pitch in and really, like, I guess the main takeaway of this is like a lot of this stuff is just a reframing of your mental mindset and like how you view things. Is it going to be a terrible, awful project, or is it going to be a puzzle? Is this going to be like am I going to let this day be super stressful, or am I just going to roll with the punches? This and that. Like, it is really how we approach it. And I think like if you're looking to approach it in a positive light, you will. And if you're looking to change things for the better, at the end of the day, you will. And this might take time, but like, we have nothing but time, to change this.
Aw, Jesus.
I was just gonna say, just to add on, thank you, Alec, and for Wintana for like bringing this up and then just creating this whole like chat. Because I wasn't, when I joined, I literally thought we were just gonna talk a bit about code and just like kind of see like where it progressed. But I love like this entire concept of like what we did and like what you guys talked about throughout this process. And it kind of reminded me of like back in college where like there were different departmental like programs or like lectures after like the actual lecture where they really talked about like specific things, and it kind of like diverged into like different topics. And this is what I kind of got from that, and I loved it. um and I think it would be cool just to hear about like your experiences after this talk, Quintana, about like a week or 2 weeks down the road. And I kind of want to see how you progress and like how it transforms and like how you feel maybe like after our next project or even after our next lecture. Because I feel like I really love seeing how like I've loved this entire experience of like seeing how each one of us grows from week 1 to like week 2 to week 3. And I think this fireside chat like really like summarizes all of that, because I don't think like we have feelings, but I think feelings is like a little bit different. Like we kind of like share our emotions for like a specific week, but I don't think we go into like we actually have like the extent or like extent of time to like really dissect like how like we progressed through a project. And I think that's super important, like how you talked about, like I'm so jealous of how you, Alec, Marianne, and Brian really like approach this project, and I love hearing like your style of doing it. And I think it was just really cool seeing your perspective, because I was kind of like when I worked in like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, like I don't think like I think I really needed someone else's perspective, like a different group's perspective, to like kind of see like how you walk through a project. And like I think that's really important for like the real world experience of like being able to work with so many different people from different backgrounds, from different styles. And like I think just having this chat is kind of like a building block for that, and kind of like for me to like frame my mind to like seeing how other people approach a problem, how you set things up. Because like my way is not always going to be right. My partner's way might not like even agree with mine. So like being able to see everyone's perspective and like how did they tackle a problem, just their general mindset and like their stress levels going through a project is so integral. And I that long my wordy like all of that was just to say that I really appreciated this chat and I thought it was super helpful. And I really do agree that we should have like a series and like continue with this, because I think it would be cool just to see our progression. Because I kind of like hearing this, I kind of like saw like felt where you guys were at, and like I kind of want to see how you guys grow and how you guys progress from like the next week. And I'm also happy to share mine. I think I was also just like this past week I was struggling a little bit more with like just getting things done and being organized. So like I also want to like contribute more and like share with you guys how I will improve like next week after like our React project and all of that. So yeah, that's kind of what I want to say, but this is awesome. So
Could be little accountability checks.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm totally about this. I will say thank you guys for showing up. Like I didn't really know what to expect when I put that post out there. If everyone was like, no, dude, like I'm just hanging out today, like I'm not gonna do that. But like I hope that everybody at least took away a little bit, at least one thing. Like my goal at the end of the day when I was an educator is like if every student took away one thing, you know, that's a win for me. And like if you guys walked away if you guys walk away from this at least thinking differently about one thing at the very least, like then I would know that like it was successful. And I would love to see like where the progress checkups like that. I would love to keep doing this, at least if we make it like a little mini series for the last two phases, you know, once a week or something like that. Or if someone wants to talk about, like Winston, if you want to talk about like your track to be it was a dental hygienist, I believe, or like Scott, if you want to talk about your background as well, or hey, like if anyone wants to talk about like any background or any bit that they think would either further other people's understanding of things or like change the way that they logically input things, you know, like that's what I'm all about. But yeah, at the end of this chat, I want to thank you guys very much for showing up. And yeah, let's do it again.
Yay.
Awesome.